Welcome back, Nerglings. Today we are returning to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, this time with a focus on the geography of the Warhammer world. We will briefly visit some of the most populous cities before moving on to arid plains, dense jungles and mountainous peaks. But before we start, be sure to like, share and subscribe so you don't miss an update. If you fancy switching on notifications too, that would be spiffing. Global geography. Following the arrival of the Slann, the continental land masses were realigned into their present shapes. This formed the basis for the Slann's hydrostatic control system, with which they were able to create various climatic zones. However, the subsequent collapse of the warp gates in the polar regions modified this plan to some extent, reforming the polar regions and shifting the balance of the system slightly. The results of this were to create volcanic activity in some parts of the world, notably in the Dark Lands and the World's Edge Mountains. The Old World lies to the west of the World's Edge Mountains. It is bound by the Sea of Claws to the north, the Great Western Ocean to the west, and the Southern Sea to the south. Its natural fauna is mixed forest in the north and central areas, with scattered forest to the south. The Old World is inhabited by the most prosperous and outward-looking of all humans, the Old Worlders. The realms and people of the Old World are discussed in considerable detail in a later section, so we'll leave this part of the world for the moment. The people of the Old World know very little about the fall of the Slann or the rise of chaos. To them the world is just as it always has been, a place threatened both by strange monsters and the powers of the Northern Darkness. Only the elves retain any real knowledge of those far-off times, and their understanding is shrouded in myth. With the fall of the Slann, the warp gates collapsed into the polar areas of the world, creating a northern and southern zone of dimensional instability. These zones appear as huge realms of darkness or negative light, a cloudy blackness whose proximity lends a dullness and oppressiveness to the surrounding lands. The size of this zone varies, but is normally restricted to an area well to the north of the Old World. The southern zone experiences a similar flux, but this is totally unknown to Old Worlders at present. The zones continue to function as uncontrolled gateways between the Warhammer world and the dimension of unformed matter and intelligence, known to the Old Worlders as Chaos. Through the zones, chaotic intelligences are able to take physical form and mental coherence, becoming demonic or divine entities. Close to the zones, biological mutation causes the creation of chaos creatures or mutants, and engenders widespread insanity. During periods of quiescence, creatures of chaos flourish upon the borders of the northern zone. They are mutated beyond recognition and live twisted lives, hunting and killing amongst their own kind. The further away from the zone, the less the effect, and creatures living too close are mutated almost instantly. And any living thing venturing into the zone itself would be demolecularized, its consciousness running into the generalized awareness of the unthinking stuff of chaos. As the zone becomes more active, it grows in area, forcing creatures of chaos to the south. At the same time, the mutating influence of the zone extends southwards. Old Worlders know and fear such times, realizing full well that an increased incidence of mutation heralds a general advance by the forces of chaos. Over a period of several years, the zone can reach as far south as Norsca, causing widespread upheaval amongst the creatures and chaos bands to the north of the Old World. These times are known as the Incursions of Chaos, when the black light flickers in the northern sky and foul chaotic creatures throw themselves upon the Old World. The most recent incursion of chaos reached as far as Prague before receding, driving many creatures of chaos into the Empire and beyond. Norsca, meanwhile, was created following the initial incursion of chaos, when the warp gates spread from the poles before receding, leaving the lands as they are today. The northern border of Norsca lies against the zone of chaos, and from this realm of darkness many twisted creatures come to trouble the human and dwarf inhabitants. These southern regions of Norsca are mountainous even where the land meets the sea, producing fjords. The margins of the fjords and the hanging valleys at their head are favoured sites for human habitation. The humans of this land are hard-fighting warriors, ambitious seafarers and hardened drinkers. They are the Norse, and their relations with old worlders are frequently stormy. Norse longships raid and pillage as often as they trade, and Norse pirates are universally feared in the northern waters. The interior of Norsca is extremely mountainous, ideal territory for the many dwarfs who live there too. The continent that lies to the south of the Old World is known as the Southlands. Its northern coasts form the southern edge of the Southern Sea, facing the Old World lands of Estalia and Tylea. These northern coasts are inhabited by humans of a different cultural heritage to those of the Old World, the Arabians. Technology and society amongst the Arabian cultures is comparable to that of the Old World. Like the Old Worlders to the north, Arabians are divided into many diverse nations, whose relationships with each other and with the humans of the north are often hostile. The coastal zones of Araby are prosperous and fertile, and include many fine cities whose harbours shelter the vast trading fleets of the Arabians. Towards the interior of the continent, the lands become drier and less productive. Here, desert caravans ply their dusty trade amongst camel-borne raiders. Further south still, like impenetrable mountains, and beyond, are the jungles of the Southlands proper. These Southlands themselves are largely unexplored, the interior of which is thick with jungle, where tribes hunt wild game and nurture crops. No one knows all that much about this mysterious region. Popular bestiaries fill it with all manner of imagined beasts, and explorers tell obviously exaggerated stories of lost civilizations, buried treasures, and marvellous magical secrets. The Dark Lands lie within a huge natural basin formed by the eastern side of the World's Edge Mountains and the Mountains of Morn. It is here that the breakdown of the Slan global design is most apparent, as countless active volcanoes pour forth black smoke and ash, obscuring the sun and shrouding the land in constant darkness. The Dark Lands have always provided a refuge for creatures of evil, notably orcs and goblins. The Far East is a very large area indeed, possessed of a unique cultural history. It would not be possible for us to describe this area properly within the space of this book. For the moment, we shall pass over these lands, leaving their exploration to others. A complete guide to the lands of Nippon is already under development. The continent of Ulthuan is home to the many nations of elves known collectively as the Elven Kingdoms. Although there are many independent kingdoms throughout Ulthuan, it is generally recognised that their overall leader is the ruler of Lothan. This harmonious situation has existed for many centuries and will probably continue indefinitely. Occasionally a king may wage war against his neighbour, but such a thing is rare and usually brief. It is not unknown for kingdoms to suffer from internal strife, or even civil war, but war of all kinds is a rare occurrence in Ulthuan. The greatest danger to Ulthuan presents itself in the form of the black fleets of the Dark Elves who raid and pillage the northeastern shores. More recently, human raiders from Norsca have also caused problems, but so far have not penetrated beyond the immediate coastal regions. The Sea Elves consider the Norse to be dangerous sea fighters, and prefer to engage them once bound for home, their ships laden with treasure and their warriors bloated with elven wine. Ulthuan is shaped like a huge hollow circle, broken only at its southern tip by the narrow passage of the Lothan Straits. A number of smaller islands lie to the south, some of which are also inhabited, and are known as the Outer Kingdoms. Ulthuan itself is basically a ring of mountains bounded by a narrow coastal zone on both sides. This divides the island continent into inner and outer zones. The lands adjoining the inner sea are peaceful, protected as they are from climactic and hostile action. The whole area is astonishingly beautiful, and much of it natural woodlands or graceful mountains. The elves that live in this paradise are called the High Elves. The majority of High Elves are studious and sheltered, contented and self-indulgent. They spend their time studying and amusing themselves, remaining ignorant or uncaring about the rest of the world. The outer coast is somewhat different. Exposed to the cold winds of the Great Western Ocean, the land is harder, and its people are far more practical. These are the Sea Elves, named after the sea of which they are the masters. From the great harbour of Lothan, the Sea Elves patrol the Great Western Ocean and ensure the safety of the seaways. Sea Elf trading fleets travel as far as Cathay and the Old World, enjoying a monopoly of overseas trade until the human discovery of Lustria. To the west of Ulthuan lie the continental land masses of the New World and Lustria, the eastern coasts of which were settled some 6,000 years ago by the elves. Although they have grown to be prosperous communities, they have never overtaken the cities of Ulthuan either in size or importance. Further exploration of the central and western parts of the continent has met with indifferent success. The central areas are vast and featureless, with the south and west barren and arid. The northern part of the eastern seaboard, including the Bay of Ice and its coastal environs, was settled by dark elves following their defeat during the civil wars in Ulthuan. This dark elf realm is called Nagaroth, Elvish for land of chill. Relations between the dark elves and the elves of the New World are fractious, to say the least, providing plenty of scope for battles between the two kindreds. Lustria lies to the south of the New World and is connected to it by a narrow isthmus. It was in Lustria that the ancient Slan built their principal base on the Warhammer world, including their main habitation areas, experimental and scientific zones, and spaceports. The north part of the continent lies within the planet's broad equatorial zone. The steaming jungles, coastal swamps, and intolerable heat of this area make it unpleasant for humans, but ideal for the descendants of the ancient Slan, who still live there today. Although most of their scientific knowledge is now forgotten, the Slan remain an extremely powerful race. They are amongst the most accomplished of magicians and the most adept of demonists. The Slan Empire consists of a number of scattered cities and countless thousands of tiny villages. The cities are extremely large in comparison with those of the Old World, and the civilization they harbour is strange and mysterious. Since the discovery of Lustria by the humans, settlers from the Old World have established themselves along the eastern seaboard, and along the banks of the more hospitable rivers. The Slan soon learned to fear their new neighbours. A series of raids by Norse settlers established the pattern of relations. The humans raiding, burning and pillaging, before looting their temples and treasure houses. Old World disease too has taken a heavy toll on the Slan, forcing them into a defensive posture within their much reduced empire. The continent of Lustria evolved from the campaigns of Warhammer author Richard Halliwell. Lustria is the strangest of all our Warhammer settings, featuring the fallen civilization of the Slan. its ancient scientific ruins in the jungles, and an unusual blend of demonism and technology. Into this world of Aztec dreams are thrust the adventuring Old Worlders and Norse freebooters, treasure seekers and settlers, with little respect for the philosophical treasures of an ancient civilization. The pygmies of the jungles, the wily Amazons, and renegade bands of man-hunting slan stir the melting pot still further. Now you may already be thinking that all this sounds a lot like European history, and indeed much of the human societies in the old world are based, at least in part, on certain civilizations of old. The Norse are of course Vikings, the Empire are Swiss and Germanic types, Bretonnians are of course French mixed with Arthurian legend, whilst the forces of Cathay and Nippon are Eastern in flavour. I suspect the modus operandi here was to ensure that historical gamers could use ready-made forces in this newfangled game, with very little in the way of modification, thus co-opting a vast ready-made community. Smart indeed. So that's it for today. We've learnt all about the vast landscapes of the Warhammer world, and the enigmatic and sometimes dangerous denizens who dwell there, from long coastlines to arid deserts and mountainous peaks, not to mention some of the most treacherous seas, strangest of marshlands and densest of jungles. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did researching and rereading my battered old copy of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Anyways, thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.